Australian democratic values are generally sensible, respectful, tolerant. We uphold equality, we value freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. On the whole, we promote debate, we respect critical thinking, we admire a sense of humour. Well, unless you're a raving lefty or a social justice warrior, that is. Our democratic values can usually withstand vigorous debate, critical analysis, satire, and even disagreements. But in contrast, Islam is weak. Islam cannot cope with critical analysis. It reacts violently to ridicule and derision. It can't even stand under the weight of a cartoon. Islam doesn't tolerate dissent or disagreement. It needs to make up words like Islamophobia because it is weak and fearful of being exposed. And Catholics have been criticised and mocked for eons, and yet they've never had to make up a word like Catholicophobia to try and silence their critics. Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, atheism and other faith systems are strong. They can withstand that kind of vigorous debate. No other group resorts to violence when mocked in a cartoon. It's only Islam, because it is weak. And right from the inception, it's had an inferiority complex that resorts to violence, punishment and censorship in a poor effort to defend its barbaric and savage teachings, beliefs and practices. You know, some Muslims want Islam to be identified as a race. I mean, imagine Christians lobbying to be identified as a race. It is absurd. How insecure could you be? Many in the world are waking up to and rejecting the push for Sharia and the Caliphate. Islam's not a race. It's made up from people from Asia, India, Africa, the Middle East. Islam is a race. I mean, it's an utterly stupid notion. But it all began with the so-called prophet. You see, Muhammad was the master of offence. He started off with some utopian idea of peace, but realised people don't actually want to be dominated by this barbaric belief system, so he made a profession out of being a victim. He used violence and severe punishment towards anyone who wouldn't accept his totalitarian notion of peace. He perfected the tantrum, but with devastating effects. He did it in the name of Allah, in an attempt to justify his pouty, weak, self-centred failures. But from the beginning, Islam has been fraught with violence, arguments, competition and confusion. Right from the start, Muslims refused to agree on a successor, and ever since the world has had to try and deal with the infantile bickering between Sunnis and Shias. Islamic governments can only retain control through fear and terror tactics, threatening severe punishments to anyone who won't conform. It is pathetic. So basically, whether a Muslim is being violent or playing the victim card, they are emulating Muhammad. Now, there's been a number of surveys recently that reveal a large number of Australians want to restrict or stop Islamic immigration. Now, some in the media feign shock at the results and think more than half of our nation are racist bigots. They try to assure us that all Muslims aren't terrorists, but they miss the point. Islam is determined by the texts which command followers to obey Allah and Muhammad. Now, thankfully, many Muslims disobey the repeated commands to chop, rape, slice, dice, enslave and execute people. But unfortunately, there seems to be an increasing number of Muslims with mental health issues that believe taking these commands literally is a valid response to the Quran. Now, I am thrilled that more than half the population can see how incompatible Islam is with our Western democracy. Now, let's hope the rest wake up soon, especially the ignorant so-called journalists and politicians who just can't seem to get their head around the fact that the Quran, hadiths and example of Muhammad are not some nice airy-fairy religious notion, but a totalitarian ideology that puts our very lives and freedoms at risk.